I always think of it in the sense of being able to take care of my future self. Like we're healthy now, we have great health care, and we're living longer. And so some people may think like, okay, I'm going to live my best life and I'm never going to retire. That would be nice, but statistically, you're more likely to be injured than you are to just die, right? And so there might become a point that although you may want to work, you may not be able to work. And being intentional about putting away for your future self is really important.
Welcome to the Teacher Money Show, the podcast dedicated to helping teachers navigate your unique financial challenges and unlock your financial superpowers. I'm your host, Sean Morgan, a full-time teacher. That's right, I teach every day just like you, and personal financial coach. And I'm here to help every teacher, whether you're a seasoned teacher looking for fresh insights or a new teacher trying to navigate your first paycheck, or in the case of today's episode, a middle-range teacher preparing for retirement. I'm here to help you have a richer wallet, classroom, and life.
The contents of this podcast are informational in nature and are not legal or tax advice, and neither I nor my guests are engaged in the provision of legal, tax, or any other advice. You should not act upon this information without first seeking appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional.
I'm so excited to dive in with Mrs. Black from Staying in the Black. We had a great conversation last time about how new teachers can prepare for retirement and plan for retirement. And now we get to come back and have another fantastic conversation about how middle of your service years teachers can prepare and plan for retirement. How are you doing, Ms. Black?
I'm great, Sean. Thank you for inviting me back to talk about mid-career teachers and how they can plan for their retirement.
Well, I wouldn't want to talk about this with anybody else but you. So let's just go ahead and jump into this fun conversation.
All right. So the last time we spoke about new teachers and kind of like they could set up their automation and they can contribute less because they got more years to go, right? So then the people that really I seem to talk to and and come to me most are those mid-career, it's the end of their career teachers, wondering if it's too late, right? And so it's never too late. So if you're mid-career, I kind of say that's anybody who's over like 5 to 10 years, to me, makes you mid-career, because depending on the municipality that you teach in, you literally, when I started teaching in New York City public schools, it was like 30 years you had to teach and be 55. Now it has moved to like almost 40 years you have to teach, and you have to be 65 or 63 when you retire. But if you're mid-career, you're kind of like at the big, like you're in the middle, exactly what it says, in the middle of your teaching career, and you may not have been able to save as much as you wanted to, right? These are the people who are like the tail end of Generation X, the beginning of the millennials, because I found like millennials are like now 40 years old. And so you had like you may have had student debt. You may have just been like, I want to live la vida loca. Like I've been living like a poor college student. And so putting my finances in place or in order wasn't necessarily a priority. You may have gotten married, had children, just different things impact how and what you were able to put away for retirement. You may not have known. So now you find yourself like 5 years in, 10 years in, and you're saying like, what can I do? So I say it's never too late. Again, always start with your numbers, right? So look at, have you been contributing to a 401k, a 457? Do you have access to, and as a teacher, do you have a pension? Is that an option for where you teach? And if you have access to all three accounts, have you been contributing and what your balances are? And so just that baseline of knowing your numbers will definitely help you plan forward. So mid-career, you can't afford to put your head in the sand anymore, right? If you really want to be able to live at the lifestyle that you've been accustomed to and be able to put away for retirement, you've got to like examine those numbers in those accounts and say, and you might say, I have none of those accounts. So everything is zero. And that is fine, right? This is not a place about beating yourself up or regret. It's just about taking a step forward and saying, I have nothing in those accounts, and this is where I want to go. Or I got $10 in these accounts, and this is where I want to go. Just being really clear about where you are and where you want to go.
So we're trying to be clear about where we are and where we want to go, but what are some like maybe rules or some guidelines? Like a teacher looks at this number of, okay, I have a 403B, and in this 403B, I've got $12,000, or in this 403B, I've got $120,000, or in this 403B, I've got, $560,000. How are they going to know that they're on track, or how are they gonna know, like, okay, this is where I'm at and I want to be here? How do they figure those numbers out? Like, how do you read those numbers so that way you can pivot and be more successful preparing for retirement?
So personal finance is personal, right? So there are guidelines. Sometimes I can find that those guidelines are intimidating, right? Those are sometimes they set goals for you that you sit there and you think to yourself, I can never reach them, right? And that's generally why I'm reluctant to share them, in the sense that I don't want anyone to feel like a failure. I feel like if you start from where you are and you know where you want to go, then you're able to set what you want for yourself. But if you want to know average wise, and this isn't necessarily the best way to look at it either, but there are two ways of looking at it. If you kind of like, am I in the average, right? So the average 35 to 44-year-old has 141,000 put away, and a 45 to 54-year-old generally has around 313,000. And a 55 to 64-year-old generally has $537,000. The question is that enough for you to live at the lifestyle that you've been accustomed to, right? So that is the average. That's the average that people have according to NerdWallet, right? But then if you want to look at what T. Rowe Price is saying as what you should have by that age, you would go, and you can just Google these things. Like, I don't really have any secrets. Like, just Google retirement by age. So if you're looking at what you should have, this is kind of like a ballpark that's probably a bit more comfortable, is that by age 30, you should have 0.5 times your salary saved today. By age 35, you should have 1 to 1.5 of your salary saved. And when they're talking about salary, they're talking about your gross salary, not your net, right? By age 40, you should have 1.5 to 2.5, 45, 2. It's weird because when they get to 45, they make the ranges wider, and they say you should have 2 times to 4 times your salary saved. By 50, 3 to 6 times. And so you see those numbers in that band getting broader, because they also understand that if they give you the numbers, you're less likely to attempt because you're going to give up. And so what I tell people, especially people mid-career and into career, is track your spending. And if you track your spending for a month, you kind of get a ballpark of how much money it costs to be you. That's what I call it. Like, how much does it cost to be you? And if you know that number, so if you're saying like it's about $7,000 a month, and some people may be listening to this and being $7,000 a month, but that could include, one, it depends on where you live in the country. If you're paying a mortgage, if you have a kid in college, if you have an expensive car, I don't know. But it's not far reaching. So then you say, oh, I spend about $7,000 a month. I want to, that times 12 multiplies to how much you spend in a year. So it's like your net would need to be $84,000, which would mean you would want to have. And so to figure that out, So you know that, okay, I spend $84,000 a year. That's how much I need my net to be. So that's not your gross salary. That's just like how much you spend in a year. Then multiply that by 25. That's how you get like your financial independence number. It may scare you, but that's a ballpark figure of how much money. And if you take 84,000 and you times it by 25, you get $2.1 million, right?
All right, so let's break this down here real quick. So
Sure.
the 25, the multiplied by 25 comes from the 4% rule, which don't want to scare off any English teachers here with some mathematics, but timesing your expenses by 25 means that you'll be able to withdraw 4% of that amount annually.
Mm-hmm.
And if, according to some studies that have been done, if you withdraw 4% annually, you won't run out of money. In the official study that was done, they ran a whole bunch of scenarios over a whole bunch of historic time periods, and only one of them went all the way to zero. So that's why 4% is considered what's called the safe withdrawal rate. So that's why you multiply your expenses by 25. But it's also important to realize that that's like if you have only investments to live off of. As soon as you have Social Security or a pension or life insurance that starts paying you back, or an annuity, or some inheritance from your great uncle, or any other income coming in, real estate, whatever you have, that money coming in will offset how much money you need to have in your retirement. Now, the more you have in your retirement, the better. But say you need $7,000 a month to survive, and you do that figure, and you go, oh man, I need $2.1 million. But then you have a pension bringing in $4,000 a month. Now you only need to have $3,000 a month, which, over the course of a year is 36,000, which you times that by the 25, it's less than $1 million. So it really depends on what your lifestyle you plan on having in retirement is, and the different income streams that you'll have coming in, whether it's just from your investments or if you have a pension or other things like that as well.
Yeah. But having the number can be a scary thing, which is like, it's personal to every person, right? You and I are talking on the phone and your spending may be totally different based on where you live. Also, the situation, right? So isn't that $7,000 your child's tuition? Isn't that $7,000 your mortgage on your house? And will that end before you go to retirement, which could cut that spending drastically? Is there something that you're doing now that talks about how much, and like once you're in your midlife, your 40s plus, you generally have children, but people have children, but you also may be entering a phase where you're responsible for your parents in some degree, right? So are you supplementing your parents' lifestyle? Just different things at different phases mid-career. And I feel like mid-career is probably the largest part of your retirement journey, or even your career journey. It's such a broad range. And so depending on when you start calculating these numbers, you have different choices. And Sean, I highlighted, ideally, you might have rental income. You may have there's just so many different things that may contribute. But likewise, as there are things that may contribute to your income, there are also expenses that may soon disappear, such as your mortgage, such as your child's tuition. It could be that when you retire, you're no longer doing the commute that you used to do to work. So you may not need to get a new car every couple of years. The car you're driving now may be the car that takes you all the way through to retirement. You may not be paying tolls. I have a coworker who could have retired 4 years ago, and I'm always asking her, like, why are you still working? Sort of thing. And she and I sat down and we figured out that like she pays around somewhere between $600 to $800 a month in tolls. Like, I live in New York City, right? And she lives in New Jersey. We work in New York. I'm fortunate that I live and work in New York City. She lives in New York City and she works in New Jersey. And so she's got to pay a toll every day sometimes 2 or 3 tolls every day to come into the city and to go back to Jersey. She's a snazzy dresser. So a lot of her clothes are dry cleaned. So she has a substantial dry. People still use that. Yeah. So she's a dry clean girl. So her clothes still have to go. Now, unlike me, I've been better this year. I don't buy lunch every day, but I used to buy lunch every day. She doesn't buy lunch every day. So she brings her lunch in every day. So our expenses are different. The other thing that happens in retirement that doesn't happen while you work is that you're no longer saving for retirement. So what we talk about, and especially something that mid-career teachers should try to do or think about, especially if they don't think that they're anywhere near their retirement number, is maxing out those retirement accounts, right? At this point, you're probably making significantly more, and those pre-tax accounts are a great place to stash your money. And if you're later in your mid-career, like if you're 50 plus, you have the ability to contribute an extra $7,000, $7,500 this year to those accounts. So whereas for those who are in your mid-career and you're under 50, you can contribute $22,500 into your 457 or your 401k. But if you are 50, the government recognizes that you may not have been able to put away as much earlier in your career, and they call these like your catch-up contributions. So if you're over 50 years old, you can contribute an additional $7,500, which would mean if you're over 50, you can contribute $30,000 this year to your retirement account. So this is the time to really sit down and look at your numbers and say, can I afford to do this? Also, people get afraid by it because they're like, oh my God, $30,000. But it's not actually $30,000, just depending on your tax bracket, because this money is coming out generally pre-tax. Now, some jobs or some systems like New York City public school system included, they allow you to, because we are eligible for the 457, in our 457, we have a Roth option. So we do have the ability to contribute that money post-tax. But if you're really trying to stack your chips and maximize how much you can put away without it taking as big a bite out of your net income, you would do it pre-tax. So really understand, and that's it. And I always think another thing for your mid-career, understand your benefits, right? Definitely if you're a first year teacher, come in, be curious and find out what for your new teacher, you find out what your benefits are. But mid-career, it's really important because there are things that you may now use that you didn't need when you were younger. And that includes some like wellness workshops and other things that you might pay somebody for. Your job, like your school system may actually offer those things, and you can utilize them. And I would never have thought of that in my early 20s, my early to mid 20s, but it's something that I want to take advantage of now. So like in my system, they just sent out, like, we have this wellness works. So they sent out, there's free fitness classes, there's free healthcare, like diabetes, menopause, all these like type of like workshops. And in those workshops, they also will then tell you about other free or low cost programs. So explore your benefits. Another thing is like mid-career, like maybe in the beginning of your career, you found out these things, but things change. So mid-career is also a time to check back in with your HR to find out, have any additional benefits become available that may be interesting to you or may help you in the long run. Also the same, like your flex healthcare spending, your depending on which system, if you have access to a health spending account, you may not have had it when you first were hired, but now because things just change as municipalities and life changes in general, they will respond differently. And so there may be benefits available to you now that were not available when you were a new teacher. And mid-career is the time to check and evaluate the services that you need and see if your school system offers it for you as an employee, and take advantage of it. Don't assume that it's static, because in most systems, those offerings are not.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That there are things that you can do to increase your contributions, and also things you can do to reduce your expenses, so that way it's easier to increase your contributions. You mentioned maximizing your benefits, getting free resources like that, and then having those contributions be tax or pre-tax, so that way you have less of the burden of that. Are there any other strategies that teachers can use to not feel the burn as much when they are trying to contribute, but they want to contribute as much as they can?
Yeah, I think the past 2 years have been really challenging, right? With the rate of inflation as it has been, and like you're looking at the prices of groceries. So what I noticed for myself is that my son is now in college, so I have tuition. But because I'm a single mom, it's just me. I no longer grocery shop. So I order meals in, and actually ordering the meals in has cut my grocery bill significantly, because I no longer waste produce. And I no longer, like, so nothing gets freezer burned, and nothing spoils in my refrigerator, because I have those meals pre-ordered. And so some people are like, oh, that sounds like some New York stuff, right? And I'm one of those people, like, really, you can't figure this out yourself. But I find it harder to cook for less people. And so I had 18 years of feeding another person and grocery shopping for two people, and and then I don't want to cook every day, but there's like, how many days can I eat this meal? Sort of thing, because I'm used to doing it for two people. And for those of you who have larger families and spouses, and this is the stage of your life, unfortunately, you may um be getting a divorce, or your spouse has passed away. There's so many things change and adjust, and it may cause you to look at some things that you never thought that you would do that make more sense for you to do it. So groceries, like on my IG account, somebody was like, I don't need TVs on Black Fridays. I need the bread to be 50% off, right? So like that's what I posted a meme that said something like that. Generally, your major costs are your housing and your food and your healthcare. So when you're thinking about that, it's kind of like, it's easier to be mindful and intentional about getting those costs down, will save you more money on the long run than denying yourself the cup of coffee, or the little. So to be clear, I feel like sometimes there's conflicting sayings in finance, like, tiny leaks sink big ships, right? And then you hear like, but cut your big costs. But if you can get if you're not a homeowner and you can rent a smaller house, or a less expensive house or apartment, that could be huge, right? Just, like $100 off is $1,200 in the year, off your living expenses. If you're looking at your groceries, um, there's lots of choices in New York City, but the least expensive place for us to shop in the city, like, we have co-ops. Like almost every borough has a co-op, so the co-op can be less expensive. I also found in my son's last years living home, like, I like shopping at Aldi's. Food waste was a huge thing in my house, and what I found was that in Aldi's, the way they package their produce, it was enough for my son and I to have like 2 to 3 meals with that, versus going somewhere like a BJ's, where you're going to get like huge quantities or sizes of food, or especially the produce that you're not going to use. Also, groceries, people, there's always the argument to go frozen or to go fresh, right? So frozen means it's less likely that it's going to go to waste. But freezer burn is a real thing. And sometimes you forget what's all the way in the back of your freezer. So looking at where can you cut comfortably, because you also get to the point, like, I'm 40 years old. I'm, 30. I should be living at this level. I don't want to go back to college living, but I always think of it in the sense of being able to take care of my future self. Like, we're healthy now, we have great health care, and we're living longer. And so some people may think like, okay, I'm going to live my best life and I'm never going to retire. That would be nice. But statistically, you're more likely to be injured than you are to just die. Right. And so there might become a point that although you may want to work, you may not be able to work. And being intentional about putting away for your future self is really important. And for those who are like, you have children, you may think like, oh, my kids will take care of me. They might not be able to. One, they might not want to, unfortunately, and two, they may not be able to. And is it fair to them that you did all these wonderful things for them and then expect them to pay you back by taking care of you? It doesn't mean that they don't, there's not some responsibility, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but you don't know what the real situation is going to be. And so for me, I see myself taking care of myself in retirement as a gift to my son so that he can live his best life and do with his funds what he's choosing to do. So that's also something that I'm saying that brought up is have the college conversation with your kids when they're younger. Right. So I started the college conversation with my son when he was probably around 10, and not the college conversation like, oh, you have to go sort of thing. But I put away money in a 529 account, and I could kind of estimate how much money would be in that account when it was time for him to graduate. And I was clear. My contribution to your college education is this 529 account, because I've sacrificed to put away money for you to go to college. If you choose a college above this 529 account, feel free, but you will have to make up the difference. Right. And most parents don't want to have that conversation with their children, or they don't have the conversation with their children until it's too late. And therefore, they're taking a second mortgage out on their house. They're doing all of these crazy things, and that's digging them deeper in a hole. And so because I started that conversation at 10, by the time he got to 18, he was really clear on what my contribution would be. And that's not to say truthfully that I'm not going to be willing to contribute, but he has in his head what my limit is. And so anything I contribute beyond that is gravy. And I've been really clear with him about it's my goal to have him graduate without debt. But the only way that I could have that is because I put away with his 529, and he was smart enough to choose a school that fit within that, what I was able to put away for him.
Yeah, I think those are some really good pieces of advice for parents to make sure that they aren't going to be adding to their burden when they're trying to focus on their own retirement. You don't want to be making it worse for yourself when you're in a point where you need to be making sure everything is perfect. The time of your mid career is when you need to be getting everything on track and dialing it in, because when you get to the end, that's you should be coasting by that point. So that's why the mid-career is a great time to just dial everything in for your retirement. And I really liked how you brought up those largest expenses as the things to be dialing in, because of course we can overspend on all sorts of things, but housing, usually mid-career is when you upgrade your housing. You say, oh, I need a bigger house. Do you really though? Think like so many people get a bigger house and then they buy the stuff to fill the bigger house, and then they complain about cleaning the bigger house.
Yes.
And then they throw away all the junk that they use to fill the house with. Like we put this huge stock in having a huge house. And most of us actually don't like having a huge house. So really ask, what are your absolute basic needs for your living, and don't spend more than you have to meet those basic housing needs. Same thing with a car. People think, oh, I'm mid-career, it's time to upgrade that vehicle, time to get the nice luxury vehicle. The vehicle is meant to get you from point A to point B, and unless
like a super nice car is just like your jam, it's like the thing that fires you up the most in this world, I highly recommend that you do not overspend on a car. You can get a nice, used vehicle that's got nice mileage, that's going to get you from point A to point B without breaking the bank. And if you're able to have that paid off, all that money that you would be paying towards your nice luxury vehicle car payment can now start going into that retirement fund, right? All these different big expenses, your food, your housing, your car, your healthcare, the lower you can get those, the more money that you're able to put aside for retirement without feeling a pinch, because we mostly feel the pinch on our discretionary spending. Everything, like, the stuff that just comes up again and again and again, it's like, well, that just happens. But it's when we have to like pull back, it's like, oh man, I didn't get to go to Starbucks today because I'm trying to be good, or oh man, I didn't do this today because I'm trying not to, like, that's when we start to feel that pinch much more. So if we can just make our regular expenses less and put more towards retirement, that really helps in the long run, and it helps us feel better about ourselves because we don't have to pinch on the little things that actually bring us joy.
Yeah. And the other part of it is that saving for, if you can get the larger expenses, it gives you more discretionary funds. It gives you also the ability to automate, because I'm a big fan of automating. So it's kind of like, if I can get my larger expenses down, I can increase the automation of my retirement savings. So that's part of the way that I have been so successful for retiring. Like, I was maxing my contributions, and so those I've my contributions are set on max. So those like $500 increments, they happen to me automatically. But because my other costs are down, and like, it's also your mindset. I always say that I am my own Joneses. I never look towards somebody else's life to say like, that's the lifestyle that I want to live. Like, comparison is the thief of joy. So I don't compare myself to what other people have. I drive a 2008 Honda Accord, and I'm the second owner. So I always say like, I buy new to me cars, not necessarily new cars. And I'm fine with that, but that's not my jam, right? My jam is traveling. I enjoy going on like great vacations and exploring new things. So that's what I choose to spend my money on. It used to be, I enjoy eating out to lunch. And so that's what I used to do too. But as I get closer to retirement and I think about like what my values are and what's important to me, they change, and that's fine. So, but if you don't look at your numbers and know where you are, you won't know where you have to go and what you do, and you'll wake up and be at the end of your career. And then that's a whole different conversation that we'll be having when we talk about end of the year, end of career teachers, because the closer you get, the less flexibility you have. Mid-career, you have the opportunity to go from like nothing in retirement to put yourself in a place to have a really decent retirement by the end of your career, if you're intentional with what you do with your money. End of career, things get a little tight, and we'll definitely speak about that in the next time that we talk. So I think mid-career is a gift. It is the opportunity to right the ship and figure out where you want to go. It's not too late. You're in a good place. If you have like 10 to 15 years minimally left, there's a lot that you can do with that time. And you can make better decisions than when you're at, the end of your career and you're just like, I don't care how much money I am leaving. Because I don't believe that you should be in the classroom or working with children K to 12 if it's not something that's bringing you joy and you're not happy to do every day, because those kids deserve the best education every single day. And one of the things, like one of the leading causes of divorce is finances, but I think it's also like one of the leading causes of stress in people's lives in general, whether you're single or married. And so knowing that you have set yourself up for a comfortable retirement, not necessarily fabulous, but a comfortable retirement, is a peace of mind. Like, you're not angry or frustrated or wishing that you were making, more money, or upset about, whatever, because you've taken care of your future self. So You're not too late mid-career. Take it as a gift. To me, the gift and the blessing that it is. Just figure out your numbers and how you're going to get there. You can definitely cut costs. Cutting the larger costs, it may seem more difficult, but it's actually easier to cut the bigger costs than it is those little discretionary things that kind of like eat away at your soul because you really want that cup of coffee or that ice cream cone, whatever your thing is. You should be able to have it.
I really want that ice cream cone for sure. So you talked about riding the ship during this mid-career, and something that people often talk about when it comes to riding the ship, which I'm sure that there's someone out there who's just like really worried about this, is diversification. Everyone says diversify. It's like the magic bullet in investing. You have to diversify. What does that mean? What role does it play for a mid-career teacher, and how can they make sure that they are diversifying well, if that's even what they're supposed to do?
So diversification is really not putting all your eggs in one basket. So when you, and again, as I said, I'm conservative. So when you're talking about diversification, yes, you can put, people think of like the stocks they hear about every day, like the Apple, the Amazon, the Tesla. And so you put all your money in Apple stocks, and then all of a sudden the company crashes. You have no money left for your retirement. Or even if you may think like, I am going to diversify, I'm going to invest in Apple, Amazon, and Tesla, they all happen to be tech stocks. And so if something happens to the tech field as a whole, and we've seen this several times, even before the NASDAQ was considered like an index, we've seen it where like the whole tech industry takes a dive, and there with that goes all of your retirement investments. So when you diversify, it's putting your eggs in several baskets, right? So if there's a dozen eggs, you have a dozen baskets to make sure that the chances of one of them surviving is higher. So when you think about that, you often hear terms like mutual funds or index funds. I prefer index funds because they follow a whole index. And some of the indices that you hear about on the news are the S&P 500, you hear about the Dow Jones, and you generally hear about the NASDAQ. But if you invest in a fund that follows one of those investment, that means if in the case of the Dow, you would be invested in the top 40 companies that are traded. If you do the S&P 500, you'll be do the top 500 companies that are invested, American companies that are invested in. And if you do the NASDAQ, I'm not sure how many tech companies that is, but you are invested in several. And you can do something even called the total stock market fund, which means you own a piece of every single company that is traded on the American, on the stock exchange. So by diversifying, you're putting your money in all of these companies, and the chances of them all failing at one time is slim to none. Because even during the Great Depressions, there were companies that were doing well. So you want to make sure that when you're thinking about diversification, it's not only different companies, but it's also different fields. So there's retail, there is tech, there is construction, there are commodities, there's lots of different things, but the more things that you're doing, and that's investing in the stock market alone. You also may think about what you have your money in, right? So there's money that you're going to put in the stock market. There may be money that you have in real estate. You may be an entrepreneur and you may have income coming from your business, but that's having, different streams, or I always call them buckets, or just different buckets of money. So that's what's going to make up your retirement journey. And that's what Sean spoke about earlier when he was saying that $2.1 million that I spoke of earlier, that doesn't mean that all of that money comes from your retirement accounts. If you have something like a pension, if you have rental income, if you are a business owner, you may have income coming from that. You may have invested in a friend's business and you'll have income. They always talk about whether Social Security is going to be around or not, but so far so good. So Social Security would be another form of income to make up your retirement cake. That's what I like to call it, is like there are layers to the cake, but you have a retirement cake because you want to blow out your candles, or you want to celebrate the fact when you no longer have to work anymore. And so you should be able to enjoy it. So maximizing your benefits, diversifying your investments, and being intentional about where your money goes, and cutting those major expenses as much as possible so that you can take care of your future self is the key to planning your retirement mid-career.
Yeah, I think that that's so important to when you're talking about diversifying, to not only diversify within your stocks, but other things like bonds have a place. I don't think they have a huge place, but they have a place of stability, right, in your portfolio. But we're also diversified as teachers in general in a pension. That's a type of diversification, because if your tech stock goes to zero, your pension probably won't go to zero. Probably it could, or they'll probably end up just like making pensions less than they were supposed to be to state pensions. But
Yes.
Same with this Social Security. You'll probably get something, right? Or having real estate, etc. All these things are things that you can do to have the maximum on your diversification, and to do really well on your portfolio for retirement. All right, that was a fantastic conversation, Miss Black. We just got this, last two questions for you concerning mid-career teachers. What's your number one tip for these mid-career teachers to have a richer wallet classroom in life?
Know your numbers. So at the end of the day, knowing your numbers will allow you to reach whatever goal you want to go to. Mid-career is definitely the place to know them so that you can set your goals and make it. And don't be afraid to learn something new, right? So as teachers, I was in a school today, and it was like people who choose to teach choose to learn forever, because you always have to know like what's new and what's happening. And we've been talking about traditional things. There are people who invest in crypto. And it is like, if that's what you choose to learn about, then learn about that. Like learn about some financial vehicle that you may not have known about before, so that you feel more in control of your financial future. So never know your numbers, and don't start learning about finances.
Awesome. When we're talking about diversification, I just kept thinking, you mean I shouldn't have everything in Dogecoin?
No.
All right. And then of course, last question, where can teachers connect with you?
So you can definitely follow me. I live on IG. I have staying in the BLK on all platforms, but I live on IG. It cross over into Facebook. So send me a message, and my podcast. So you can always catch me on wherever you listen to podcasts at, and I hear the conversation.
If you'd like to come on the podcast for coaching, to share an expert opinion, or just to talk about a topic you think is relevant, I'd love to talk to you. Just fill out the form at teachermoneyshow.com/guest. I look forward to talking with you.